Good afternoon, everyone. As you can see, that's me. And briefly, as sort of an opening, my background roughly is after working in the aviation industry in Australia for some 15 years, I relocated to Hong Kong as a contract engineer with a company called HAECO, which was Hong Kong Aircraft Engineering Company. They are a member of the Swire group of companies and a sister company to Cathay Pacific. At the time of the incident, I was manager line maintenance of HAECO, and we supplied engineering support to most of the aircraft through Hong Kong on line maintenance, and our base maintenance section, to which I was not involved with, but that we did major overhaul work, mainly Cathay Pacific and overseas contractors and the RAF. And even at one stage there, we looked after Qantas checks on their 707s when they had an industrial dispute with Australia, which caused a little bit of aggravation at the time. Anyhow, and back to the Lufthansa, the incident, and the Brits love to call accidents and things like this incidents, but anyhow, the incident, I'll just refer to my notes here because I know there are 747 people here today. So please don't ask me any involved questions about 747. And to cover my backside, I took these figures from the actual report of the incidents. The aircraft was a Boeing 747 220E Freighter, manufactured in 1981, and is powered by 4 General Electric CF6 in power plants. The fuel load at departure was 107,000 kilos, or 30,949 gallons at the SG at the time, and the wind at the takeoff was 090 at 6 knots. The aircraft was operating Hong Kong to Frankfurt via July and departed the late evening. And during the departure, the fault failure of number 2 engine, the actual status, there was a problem with the state of control and it lost power. They aborted takeoff at the later stages of the deceleration. The aircraft veered off the runway. There was no reason as to why it went off the runway in the report, and at the time the pilots were talking about brakes and things, but I think maybe the water at the end of the runway might have been a bit of a deterrent. For those that are interested, the calculated V1 for rotation was 157 knots, and the VR was at 168 knots. The call for the abort was made between 157 and 167 knots. And reason for aircraft departing the runway was not determined, and that's quoting actually the report. The aircraft left the runway at 55 knots. Now that's the position of the aircraft as it came to rest off the runway. All the gears were detached, engines. There was no actually damage to the primary structure of the aircraft. It's mainly secondary structure, except for the front end of the aeroplane, which made it repairable. This shows it actually where it left the runway. The right-hand body gear went over here, and it actually tore the body gear out of the aeroplane, where the left-hand body gear folded back into the aircraft and both wing gears detached. As you can see here, the number 2 engine and the number 1 and number 2, number 1 not so noticeable because the number 2 and the number 3 engines had failed forward as they're designed to do, with fuse plugs in the drag braces, so that if they landed, as in this case, on the dirt or into the water, the rear drag brace with fuse plugs will blow and the engines will be carried forward under their own weight and speed. So that does not damage the primary structure, which is the front spar area, which of course, as you're all aware, the wing is all fuel tank, apart from along here, which are fairings and across the back end. But all that grey cover is, for those that don't know, is fuel tank. The next photo is a bit later. It's the governor having a good old look around the aeroplane. He had to be in at that stage. This is the forward undercarriage area. The nose gear is folded back in here. That section there is part of the first class floor. Now, that's the part of the wheel well, and this area in here is what they call the lower 41 section, which houses all the electronic equipment. Actually, if this was a freighter airplane, I'm sorry, I did not mention that. If there'd been first class passengers sitting in this area, Well, I think they would have had dirty pants, I think. That's the floor section that's folded back down. It's a container. By this stage, all the containers had been removed from the aeroplane. There is the cockpit floor, and that exited up behind the flight engineers, where a flight engineer would sit. Now that's the left-hand body gear which folded back, and this I think it's about the first time a chainsaw had been used on maintenance of an aeroplane. But we're clearing all that rubble away before we move the aeroplane. The right-hand body gear, as I mentioned, had detached completely. This is another shot showing how the engines had failed and moved forward and had done no structural damage to this upper front spar and fuel tank area. There's two shots here which, without getting too technical, are where wing gear, forward wing gear attachment, and the next shot will show you these particular points failed, so that when on impact those fuse plugs there all failed and the gear cleared totally away from the rear spar area, which is all that area in the front there, which is also the fuel tank. So there was no primary damage to that structure at all. This is the left-hand body gear again. We just got getting into it, and they'd already taken the wheel off there. But again, that had failed and moved straight back. At the time of the accident, at one of the meetings we had with CAA, they closed the airport because where the aeroplane was on the runway, it restricted takeoff for any of the aeroplanes, so that which were all stuck there. And as Hong Kong is one only runway, it was quite devastating to everything up there. So the CAA said, if you don't get off the runway in 2 days, we're going to blow it up or bulldoze it into the drink. So after various meetings with them, they agreed that if we took the fin off, then they would clear it for lighter 300 type series, 310s, 320 Airbus and 737s. So then we got the problem, well, we've got to get the fin off, what do we do? So I called Boeing, and they said, well, get a guy with bolt cutters and cable cutters, and a little guy, which we had plenty of them up there, of course, and set him up and a hammer, and take out 100 of the bolts, which are in the rear section, and chisel out the 48 8 bolts in the front, cut all the wires, and then the other problem we had is doing that, we didn't have a sling. And Boeing had been on their way. When I initially contacted Boeing, they'd get their team together to come out, but that wasn't going to happen overnight, of course. So Hong Kong's such a place, and the facilities in those days, where your access to so many facilities, and our plant equipment guys, we said, right, we need a sling. So overnight they went down to another 747, a couple of them parked in the ramp, couldn't get out. Got up in a cherry picker, measured it all up. Next morning we had a sling. Then we lifted the fin off the next night. So that opened the runway for the operation. Now the big thing we had to do here was move the aeroplane out of the dirt onto the hard standing so that we could get it moving. Now to do this, the CAA had low profile jacks on site. But when we got the low profile jacks out there, we found that, you see, that is the edge of a pit. We had to dig a pit to get the low profile jacks under the body jack points. Now again, Hong Kong being Hong Kong, we got onto the military they set out the Gurkhas, and the Gurkhas got in there and dug the pits. So it's just an amazing place. And we got the jacks in, and with airbags, we now are starting to get the aeroplane lifted. So we now got the aircraft up. We've got the nose is in a cradle, which we had to manufacture. The low loaders were China Light and Power units, which they had available up there, and again, called right out they come. And we get the aeroplane up onto those, and we get it, and go onto the hard standing. Once we got on the hard standing, we get a tail jack in, and we've got the body gears now lifted up, and we're now putting in because there was no damage to any of the structure. This is the beauty of this type of aeroplane. These body gears were flown out from the States, and we just fitted the body gears. They went straight into the position. So, and that shows another shot of the. So you can see all this blank spot at the back. This is all where fairings and whatnot are. These are the flaps here. Prior there, this main spar, the rear spar area there. So the body gear's in. Now this is a bit later in the shot actually, but I missed this up on the thing. That's getting under tow and close to the hangar. Now we then got it moving at night. One failure on the tow, which was absolutely quite astounding because we were expecting all sorts of drama. Front cradle, which is there, which I've got a photo of a little bit later. Again, Hong Kong United Dockyards are part of the Swire Group. So we needed a cradle for the nose to drop on, so Hong Kong United Dockyard, they knocked that cradle up overnight. I'd love to see it all happen down here in Australia like this. So that's the actual cradle. My team wanted to do a bit of advertising, so they stuck a HACO sign on it, but that's the actual cradle holding the nose. Oh, and that's me at the site, because I was seconded CIA at the CID at the time. That's actually where we're doing the welding, because on the tow, the swivel point failed, and there was kerosene leaking from the centre tank, but not from any major damage. And the airport manager there, Dick Siegel, he got a little bit upset about fuel runway and he was going to blow the aeroplane up. But we managed to get that sorted out. And when we got it back to the hangar, the guys reckon they wanted to do a little bit of ACO publicising, so that was that. And that's the aeroplane in the hangar. Now what happened then is we were contracted by Boeing to remove, with our base maintenance crew, all the damage to gear. And then Boeing flew in their team, which is absolutely astounding when you see what they turn up with. The complete lower section 41, that area there, was removed. They jack points through the cockpit wings, and that was shipped in. And then Boeing completed the repairs, and 3 months later, the aeroplane departed. I think it was something like $50 million. The repairs, but then a new freighter would cost somewhere in the vicinity of $110 million at the time, so it was well worth their little bit. So that's all I have to tell you all about, Dolly. My pleasure, it's an honour to be here. Thank you very much.